Hi everyone, this is a review for the final exam. I just want to give you a little breakdown on what we're looking at for this final exam. There will be 40 multiple choice questions made up of chapter 8, 7, and 6 with it. And one of the things is, let me give you a breakdown on the multiple choice. There's 40 questions made up of chapter 8, 7, and 6. Approximately there will be 17 questions from chapter 8, 5 question multiple choice question from lab and homework 6, 15 from chapter 7, 3 from multiple choice from chapter 6. That's it. So add up all this first column here, it should be about 40 questions approximately with it. What I like to do is I'm going to go through. I know some of you might have the 7th edition, some of you have the 6th edition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the electronic textbook with this thing, and the first one I'm going to go through with you is just recap some of the stuff on here, what we talked about. The first one I want you to look at is on page, every page number that I refer in here is referring to the 7th edition book. The page I'm referring to right now, the first question I'm going to first point on is 500 and page 523. Look at accessing. Read the section that says accessing array components. You need to be able to access this array component. I want to give you an array with a size with it. I want to ask you what is the range for that. So an array with a particular range. So for example, if you look at here in your book, there's going to be an array name and array index exponent with this. So if you look at the array access component for this thing, what I'm going to do is I could give you an array dimension with this, and I could ask you what is the range. This is a two-dimensional array, which I'm looking for is a one-dimensional array. Hold on, give me a second here. I'm looking for this thing. It's actually this one right here. Let's take a look at it. This is the section on accessing arrays with this thing. In here you have a list of basically 6, and I gave you an array of this right here. So the question I could ask you is, assume that I give you a following array size, which one I need for you to know the range. So in this int list of 10, the range would be from 0 to 9. Okay. So even though if I ask you is the length or the size of it, it's going to be 10, correct? So if you start counting, it's always based on counting on 1 or 0. If I'm asking for the component, all right, the component is what's inside of these square boxes here. So if the array index or element, if I refer as the word as element, index, that's what you start counting as 0. If I start to ask you what the length or size, you start counting as 1. So if I ask you what is the size of this array, you say 10. What is the length of this array? The length is 10. When I ask you what is the component, what's inside of component 0, 1, 2, you start counting with 0. Okay, so that's how you access array and how you read the content from this thing. Okay, there are subscripts to this, so make sure you understand what takes place with this thing. The second point I want to make is on page 574. Go to page 574, and I would like for you to look at the on page 574. I'm going to jump around a lot here, so bear with me. I'd like for you to know the definition at the bottom where it's multi-dimensional array with this thing. So on page 574 in the 7th edition book, if you can look up the multi-dimension arrays, more specifically, I like for you to know the nth dimension, the definition of the nth dimension, array. my book in 7th edition is page 574. So hang on here. It's the bottom. Multi-dimensional. Let me look up multi-dimensional array with that. It'd be easier with it. So here's what I want you to know about the two-dimensional arrays with this thing, is that there's a collection of fixed number arranges in rows and columns for this thing. All right. So in the stock problem that you look at, all right, in the stock problem that you looked at is the this is parallel arrays with this thing. Hold on. Hold on. Okay, so I found it. It's on page 574. Make sure you know this definition for me, please. The nth dimensional array is a collection of fixed number component arranged in the nth dimension with the same. So here's what I'm talking about. Here's the nth dimension right here. All right. So if you look at this, make sure you understand the definition for this thing. All right. Understand the definition is a general a collection of fixed numbers of component range in the n dimensions n is greater than or equal to 1 with this thing. So this is what I'm talking about. That make sure you understand that. The other one I need for you to the third point I want to make is that I looked on starting on page 564, bottom of page 564. It talks about a two-dimensional array, a enumeration type with it, but where I want to focus on the two-dimensional array with this thing. And if you come down here, read on the part that says two-dimensional array that could process in 3 ways with this thing. Process a single element, process the entire array, process the particular row and arrays with it, called row processing and columnar processing. The part that I want to bring your attention to is the one that is, if you scroll down and find the section on page 566, it talks to you about the initialization and print, okay, which is this part right here. So in the initialization and print for this thing, on page 566 where it says initialization and print, for a certain row number and a certain how you process, starting with the initial, it says suppose that you wanted to initialize row number 4, that is the 5th row at 0, as explained earlier with this thing. So what I will do is I'm going to give you a particular for loop, 2 for loops with that's very similar to the initialization for this thing. And in here, in the initialization part, this is the part that I will ask. The test question is, you need to be able to print a row number. How do you print? So here's a row. You're going to go by each individual element individually with this thing. Alright? And you output this thing out with it. And to process this thing is how do you initialize each of the component of the matrices. You're starting with the row and a nested column. So the outer loop is always going to be the row. The inner loop is going to be the column that actually is going to process it to come number with this thing. Now these things are constants, number of row, number of column, that you will set constants with this thing. Okay? So I like the test question I will pose in here is I'm going to give you a matrix with a two-dimensional array. The first dimensional array that I will give you will be something like a matrix, I don't know, like an int, call that array. I'm going to give you, remember the first array in two-dimensional, first one's going to be a row, second one's going to be the column, and inside of that, if I ask you for dimension of this array, let's say 5 and 7, so it means what? This thing has 5 rows and 7 columns. All right, so that's the dimension for this thing, dimension for this array. And then I'm going to ask you a very similar problem: is how do I process the columns and row for this right here? How do I print it? Okay, or initialize it? So make sure you understand how to at least initialize this right now for me. All right. Next, I want to talk to you about, and then I'm going to get you to output the row and columns for that. All right. The next one is if you go to